Today we have a very special, I'll call him a cast and crew here with us. We have Paul Canoville, the first black player to play for Chelsea Football Club, and he's founder of the Paul Canoville Foundation. We'll talk to him about that today. Shaka Hislop, I'd like to say my dear friend, played for Newcastle, West Ham, and Trinidad and Tobago as their goalkeeper, ESPN commentator, ESPN FC commentator. We hear him all the time. And yes, he's better looking than me. Mark Wright, a journalist, producer.
So is Canna's.
Yeah, exactly. Well, it's not really hard. It's a low bar here on this side of the table. We got journalist, producer, and documentarian Mark Wright. Mark's a writer and producer. He did Redemption Song, a film about his beloved Howard winning the National Soccer Championship. He wrote for ESPN for 15 years and also a dear friend. I'm happy to have this. Happy to have all you guests here today. Today we're going to talk about racism in soccer and really in sport generally. And obviously you all have a unique perspective on this. And also Ray Hudson today is going to act as one of our panelists because Ray grew up really and played in a time when black players were just breaking into the game. So I thought it'd be very interesting to get his perspective. Neil, why don't you get us started, Neil?
Okay. Let's start with where we are right now and the response in football to the George Floyd tragedy. Shaka, has it been the right response? Has it been enough?
I think it has been. What you've seen from players and clubs to join in the movement and have their voices added. I've always felt that football can lead to societal change. We are pillars in many communities, and given the diversity that comes with many dressing rooms, particularly in today's football, we have unique insights and unique relationships that I think can continue to drive that change. That being said, I think the statement that FIFA put out yesterday as the world governing body was far too weak, far too ambiguous, given their own standing in the game, given their importance to not just confederations, but to their different member associations, to the leagues and to the players, to have a statement that was as vague and as easily interpreted and in many circumstances, easily exploited as the one they put out, simply didn't go far enough. It's a start, but it was not the kind of start, certainly not the kind of statement that I would hope from the governing body like FIFA.
Shaka, were you surprised at the actual lack of strong pointedness about them, given their history, when they left it so late to jump on the anti-discrimination train?
I'll answer with a yes and a no. Yes, in that, as I said, I do feel football can drive a lot of this change, and I hoped that FIFA would recognize that, especially given some of their own programs. The fact that Say No to Racism banners are always present at FIFA recognized games, but I also say no in recognizing that Gianni Infantino, in one of his first acts as FIFA president, got rid of FIFA's Commission on Racism and Discrimination. Listen, the criticism to that was that same commission only met 3 times in the 3 years previously, and it probably need to be renewed and reinvigorated, but it did not need to be scrapped. And Infantino's response when asked about it on a recent visit to Trinidad and Tobago was that it's all our responsibility to deal with racism and discrimination. Yeah. And I felt that showed a lack of leadership. And so, which is why I answer that question with the yes and the no. Football can lead, and it has in the past, but just right now when you needed strong, forceful and forthright leadership, it's been wanting.
Part of that, Shaka, is because I would dare say that when they were putting out that statement, they didn't have a voice like yours at the table to say, okay, I think this is not strong enough, this is not pointed enough. This looks like a statement for statement's sake, just so we can check the box. And that is part of the issue with governing bodies and teams in general. How dare you put the onus on the players on whom the abuse is toward, right? They didn't even ask for this. Much of these guys, and you guys know, we've talked and we know most of them, you put them in a position to now be the cheerleaders, to now be the superheroes. A lot of these guys aren't even comfortable putting themselves in that type of an environment and being the ones that say, look, I have the blowhorn, follow me. Not everybody can be Raheem Sterling. Not everybody's got that type of cachet. There are lots of guys that I talked to who said, I don't want to say anything in fears of retribution. I might piss off my owner. I might get traded. I might get sold. I might lose a sponsorship. So shame on you, owners and chairmen. The next time you have a Zoom call, I challenge you to do this. Look around the room. Look around and all those square boxes. All the boxes look like you. You got a problem. Fix it at your table.
Paul Canoville, you were 20 just when you broke into the Chelsea team as a first black player. And the abuse you received as you took to the pitch was a tsunami, a tirade of abuse. How do you deal with that as a 20-year-old?
You don't. It's unexpected. It's a surprise. The joy of just being a professional footballer, the joy of going to games where you're given the chance to break through into the first team, and that's what it was for me. First game into the first team, and then to go and warm up and to receive that kind of abuse, it was shocking for me. I didn't expect it. I've done them with grassroots, brought me through semi-pro, Hilland Borough, and the only time I experienced racism there when I was about 17 years old, played away at Dover. I can't say I was roasting the right back the first half until coming the end of the first half. He told me, do that again, N-word, and I'll break your neck. Legs. Stopped me completely. I went in second half and I was quiet in the corner. And when I came out, I didn't even want the ball. I was afraid of getting the ball. Until one of the teammates, Francis Joseph, asked me, what's going on? And he told me, I had to tell him, look, the guy said he's going to break my legs, Nick. He was furious. He said, you keep what? So he upended him. He said, come and break my legs. And it led to that. It made it easier for me to continue playing my game. But then coming to play your first team at a professional level and receiving that, I wasn't receiving it from players, don't get me wrong, they were great teammates. But from the crowd, that in itself had changed a lot of things for me. If this is what I'd got to battle through, and don't get me wrong, as a child, I battled through racism. I lived in Middlesex. But here in a sport that I love, that I wanted to be a professional, you know what I mean? That was my dream. And to receive that, it turned my world. You know what I mean? And the fight I had to do to gain the acceptance. And then you know it, Neil, it was about after 3 years to get the acceptance and to call my name, to sing my name. You don't know how hard it, for me, I had to play twice as better than my teammates. And why should I? You know what I mean? I should have been accepted for who I was and for the colour shirt I'm playing for and the team I'm playing for. But every day when I went home, it was like, what can I do? What can I do to make it right?
So how do you think someone like Weston McKennie, who's 21, or Jadon Sancho, who's 19?
DeAndre Edson.
Yeah, but he's a little bit older, DeAndre, yeah. How do you think they would be coping now, given that they're making clear statements?
To be honest, you know, they've seen us past players and what we've received and what we've gone through. If they're strong enough, they'll concentrate on their game. Ignore that. Don't get me wrong. And that's what you have to do. You really do have to ignore those kind of stupid. They're ignorant of if they're trying to put you off, it's not going to work. And don't get me wrong, if it did, you're allowing it to. You've got to continue and think about your game. You're at a team, no matter whatever team you're at, you're playing for a team, you're supported by your fans, should be supported by your fans, but you're supported by your teammates. And that makes a difference when you've got your teammates behind you. So, yeah, I'll tell them to play and get their head down and show them what you can do and believe in yourselves, because that's what it is at the end of the day.
Can I just interject here?
Yeah, please, Shaka, go ahead.
I want to take this opportunity to sing the highest praises of Weston McKennie, of Jadon Sancho. For this reason, it's easy to forget, and as much as we've kind of grown up with these names and on the tips of our tongues and knowing who they are, and we can speculate about their careers and how much money they're earning and what their values are as footballers. We're talking about teenagers. Yeah. We're talking about young men who are just, I think Jadon Sancho turned 20 just a few weeks ago.
The kids.
Now, I didn't turn pro until I graduated University of 23. I cannot imagine that I could have carried such a burden that's being asked of them at 19 years old. And to do it with the grace, to do it as forthrightly as they have done, I cannot sing their praises highly enough and applaud these young men for the stance they've taken, especially when you considered, and both Paul and Mark have touched on it, the risks that come with taking that stance.
Well, let me ask a couple questions here. The first to Ray. Ray, when was the first time you played with a black player? I know you for many, 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 many years, and you are probably extraordinarily to the left of me, and I'm to the left of Lennon. So I think you're okay in this thing. But
the Russian one or the Liverpudlian one?
Both. They're both okay. They're both my heroes, actually. So don't worry about it. I would say this, but Ray, I want to know when you had your first experience, and did you feel a responsibility? Mark brought up, people need to stand up. Did you feel a responsibility to stand up for your teammates?
I'm so proud to say that I'm in the company of all of us here today, and everything that Shaka, Paul, and Mark said has touched me. My best friend growing up, when I was 8-year-old to this day, is a black lad called Mickey Wilson, who was my hero. And the best football I'd ever seen as a kid. Everybody wanted to be like Mickey. We grew up together, skin with knees together, umbilical cord between us, true brothers. Grew up listening to our music, Tamla Motown, the Four Tops, the Supremes, and football from the time that we left school to the time that the lights went out. In the park, and then we'd go into the streets and play together. We were inseparable, and the most wonderful human being I've ever known in my life, Mickey. And is that this day? Now, I heard things said to him that at that age were just alien, unbelievable. But it wasn't too bad. I must say, in our area, in our village, in our part of the country, it wasn't so bad. As we grew up together, we started to recognize that there was
what do you mean it
another
wasn't
side
too
to
bad? It wasn't too vicious, or I don't
it wasn't,
understand.
because Mickey was an orphan as well. So everybody knew that he was a special lad, and he was gifted, so gifted, and that didn't shield him from hearing things from these people that would come along. And it would kill me, Charlie. It would hurt me. I'd cry at nights when I'd go home and tell me mom and dad about what they said about Mickey. And I couldn't understand it because I never saw that in him. But as we grew older and we realized in the harsh reality of the world that it wasn't just playing in the park, trying to be Pelé and trying to be a Brazilian in those days. But then in the late 70s, when Cyril, Laurie and Brandon, the 3 degrees as they were called, and that's debatable whether that was a nicety, but the West Brom trio was so inspirational to Mickey and to me as well. And what they went through, these lads know this was beyond horrific. And the strides that it's been made in the decades past have led to a better situation, but light years away from what it should be. And this situation with George and the condemnation around the world that this has brought, and the realization that we've come a long way, but we are nowhere close, and that this racism cannot be fought with just on the social media side. There's got to be proper authoritative action from our leaders. And when that leadership doesn't come through, this is what is igniting everything. But as a footballer, Charlie, long-winded answer, I'm sorry, but it was something that we saw, we knew, we tasted, we smelt, we recognized it as not right. And he depended on his friends all around him to protect them, and he got them because he was that much of a great person.
All right, question for Mark. I'm sorry, go ahead, Paul. You want to add to that, please?
Sorry.
No, please, Paul, go ahead.
Sorry,
Okay.
Mark, sorry. Because it's experiencing racism in football, and a difficult time for me was being at 12 years old. And I hadn't received, when I say racism, I hadn't seen racism in sport until then. And I wasn't even playing. And it was that I asked to go to a game, a football game, a live football game, and watch, where my mother was frightened for me to go. I watched ever she knew about football or hooliganism, I didn't know, but she was frightened for me to go. But I asked a white guy, a white man, he took me. I said, I begged my mum, and he took me. The game was at Loftus Road, QPR, West Ham. No word of lie. I stood there. I didn't think I was standing. I was standing, jumping, because I couldn't see. The people were all tall in front of me. I'm jumping. And a man looks at me, and he says to you, your dad ain't doing too well, is he? So I'm thinking, how does he know my dad? Because my dad plays cricket. He lives in Southall. So I'm not responding. I'm thinking, whoa, I'm thinking I've got to tell my dad, your mate's here or something. Until I've realised, I'm not even realised. The white guy who's took me, he said, Paul, forget that. He said, what do you mean, forget that? He was talking about Clive Best, who was playing for West Ham. Wow. Trust me. And that was when racism, I didn't know anything about it until I went back home and realised that was where it is taunting racism at me. And that's what I found. So when you're seeing now a situation, we've come a long way, but there is so much to be done. I know we're doing advocates with me. I'm an advocate for racism. I go into schools, even responding at Chelsea and so forth. But what happened there with this George in Minnesota, it affected me. It hurt me. And part of being across the border is seeing that it just reflects of what can happen to our own kids right this very minute. Right this my moment, it hurt me. I don't know if my kids are safe. And that's what I'm concerned about, that. Just for the little trouble of going out in the night and being stopped. And don't get me wrong, I think it affects, like you said, the whole wide world. But as a black person, it hurt us most. It hurt us a lot.
Fair enough. We can't, look, I can't pretend to know what Paul and Shaka and Mark, you guys are going through. But I want to ask Mark. Mark, first of all, I want to hear your general reaction on the George Floyd situation. But I also want to get from you, whose responsibility is it to step up? Like, I don't, in a sense, this is the first time I've heard from Michael Jordan, for example. And it hit me. Wow, this must be something important if he's stepping up to do it. Can you give me your sense of things?
Yeah, sure. Well, first off, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, so I've got two boys here in the house. One's a college freshman, another one's a high school freshman. And they know I'm on this call with you guys. Ray Hudson holds a very special place in our house. So,
yeah, mine too, but it's with my wife, Mark. So stop.
I
just had the big boy sneak in here, and he just took a picture of you, Ray. I'll answer that a couple of ways. My former coach is almost 70 years old. I told him I was going to be on with you guys, and he was immediately happy for me. Most of you know Ian Bain. And at the same time, he was troubled. He came to America from Trinidad, post-civil rights America, post-Vietnam America. And he lived through that time as a young lad, 19, 20, 21, 22, playing ball at Howard University. And he's looking at the news now. And Paul, you talked about how the events of the day hit you. He's looking at the news today and what's going on in the world right now. And he's thinking he's in a time warp. He's thinking that he's in a dream and it's all in black and white. And he's sad because he's sorry for his grandkids because their future looks like his past. In the last couple of days, I have fielded phone calls and text messages, I'm sure many of you had as well, from many of my white friends, guys and gals who I'm just like down and dirty with. This is my people. 2 nights ago, I had a former colleague calling me, sobbing, 10:30 at night. He said, Mark, let me just call you. How are you feeling? I can't even. And so the event of the day has now made this real for them, right? This has been our reality. This has been our pandemic for a very, very, very long time. And George Floyd has now made it real for people who are even woke or people who even care, but now it's real for them. And you know what? Black people are tired. They're tired. They're like, we've been running down the street saying, no justice, no peace, we need change, right? And until the masses have finally made it their problem, now it seems like something, oh shit, this is a pandemic too, we need to fix it, right? That's the good that's hopefully coming out of this. And Charlie, you talked about what can happen. You talked about leadership, Ray. I hope I go to sleep tonight and wake up that a leader can say, and it could start at the highest office. You know who we're talking about. But if it doesn't start there, it could start below him and below him and below her. To say, look, if you're a police officer who harbors this kind of hate and who is walking the beat looking for black people to fuck with, to abuse, to haze, we're coming for you. We're coming for you. We're coming for your badge. We're coming for your family, right? We don't need them feeling like, you know what? I could just be casual, put my knee on this brother's neck, and nobody will give a shit.
Can I bring it back to football then? Shaka, you were around in the Premier League when the Kick It Out, Kick Racism Out project started, give racism the red card. Has football done enough in its own backyard? Do we, on the pitch, we have a lot of ethnic minority players, but not an awful lot of officials. Managers, we still don't see many, and boardroom, absent. Is football doing enough?
I think football has tried to play its part as best as it possibly can. And full disclosure, I still serve as honorary president of Show Racism the Red Card. Football has tried to play its part, but ultimately there's a parallel existence for football clubs in that we're football clubs, we're businesses. We have to go out and play games and, importantly, win games. But for instance, when you try to think of the backlash in the Premier League, when a version of the Rooney Rule was floated as being introduced in English football, and the discussion that ensued, and I used the word a moment ago. The only way to describe it was backlash. How could this happen? And I think that's where football has failed to move the conversation. And now, outside of football, in the light of everything that's happened with George Floyd and our discussions as to how we move this forward, everybody is talking about having those uncomfortable conversations with our white friends, with our white co-workers. The version of versions of the Rooney Rule as to be introduced into English football is football's version of that uncomfortable conversation. We have to have it. We have to push this legislature through. Look at the effect that it had on the NFL. Now, nobody has said in the NFL that you have to hire a black guy. Nobody in the NFL says that in amongst the number of clubs that compete, you have to have a certain number of black head coaches or black offensive coaches. All they've said is interview, let them get a chance to put their cards on the table. And the result of that is an increasing number of black coaches, because now all of a sudden, black ex-players, black qualified coaches, black backroom staff come and present their ideas. And people are recognizing these guys have just as good, if not better ideas than the people we were thinking about or who had topped our list. And that's what we're seeing in English football. But all of a sudden, that discussion became perverted. And where I think football let its black players, its black fans down, is in not forcing those conversations through, not having football's equivalent of the uncomfortable conversation.
And Shaka, I think we're going to see a shift because of Neil, you mentioned bringing it back to football. I'll bring it back to George and how it relates to football. I think now, see, it's not okay anymore to just kick it out and walk on the field with the pomp and circumstance and have your prepared statement, right? It's not okay. Hey, Paul, it's not okay now to tell a 20-year-old to say, hey, man, you just got to dig deep. You got to ignore it and hope your teammates can get you there so you can get through. Now, that was okay for a certain period, but now we're at a pivotal point now where we need to see what we've done in the past. We're at a certain point, and now we need to push this thing forward. And I think, and I've said it at the front end, it starts at the chairman's table. It starts at the owner's table.
Yeah, I was going to say just that. If there aren't minorities in the boardroom, can it change?
I see that, and I hear what you're saying. I just feel they're still frightened. I feel the chairmans are still frightened. I still feel that they're frightened to employ a black coach who's an ex-player of the club, who's been given his service to the club, been given him a chance. I still don't see it. I don't believe in it. I really don't. There's too many. I can go right back when the days of Paul Davis at Arsenal. I thought he was a great player. Done his 4 badges. I don't know what happened, but a position that he was supposed to go for, he went, but was given to a person who hadn't had the coaching badge, and he was white.
Yeah.
Don't get me wrong. When I see things like that, it upsets me. So why can't we give him that chance?
I think
why at least when we say in a position of George now, we're going to think, well, hey, what? We've got to start being equal now. A situation with George might turn, not like in football, but something might erupt into football that I think we should start giving the black player a situation, a position in football. No, why should it be like that? It shouldn't have been like that in the first place.
It seems, Paul, right across in so many levels, though. It's not just that we don't have the right ideas for addressing things and discussing it and moving the needle along. Right across the top, from in all facets in the game, in our politics, there doesn't seem to be the lack of ideas rather. It seems to be the lack of the courage from these people that are leading us.
It is the lack of courage, and I just don't feel the strength. And if you don't have that support behind you, how far can we go? We can't go any further. If we're not getting support from them believing us, how can we go? Where can we go?
Let me ask this then to all of you. I'll start with you, Mark. What should white people be doing about this?
So I think white people should be doing what the white people on this call is doing, right? You need to, or you should, come with us. We're already out there on the front lines, right? We're already out there on the front lines saying, we need your support. These are the areas where we need change, right? I mean, it's so funny. I had a documentary friend at ESPN tell me, hey, whenever you're working on a black story, if it's a black story, you got to make sure you have influential white voices in your story. I'm like, why is that? Because when you have an influential white voice or a white face in your story, it legitimizes your story. And that's exactly where we are. That's what I told my friend who called me the other night, sobbing and asking me about my sons and calling them by name. right? That's what I asked them to do. Come with me. Get on the boards of the organizations that I'm on, support the organizations that I support, obviously vote, and those things. We can't just be appalled at, oh my God, I can't wait for things to just get back to normal. Normal was never good.
It was never good, and it wasn't close to being great. Let me tell you that. It wasn't even good. Let me go ahead, Paul, and then Shaka. I want you to answer this question. I have another question for you.
I agree with what Mark said there. My white friends, all the white people as such, should come on the front line with us and see what it is. Today was a statement, I don't know if you heard, Neil, at Hyde Park, yeah? Black Lives Matter. I would have been there, believe me. But what I saw, my cousins were there and they filmed the amount of white and black that was together, actually together, and seeing what was responsible, seeing what was actually happening and how we feel. And that's what is needed right now. Both of us, seeing how they feel, how it is for both colors, to see how it was for us, how it is. And it's determined, right? When you see that, then you know you can come back and tell me, Paul, I understand. Because many of you don't understand. I'm sorry. You say you do, but you don't. Until you feel it and see it, then you can come and tell me, Paul, now I understand. That's how I feel. That's my opinion of this. I'm sorry, that's how I go.
No, that's good. Shaka?
Yeah, I agree with everybody here. I'll start by saying that to answer the initial question, what can white folks do at this point in support, is, as I mentioned, have those uncomfortable conversations. Get to understand the history of the suffering and the struggle that Black people have endured, from slavery through colonialism, through John Crow in the US, through redlining, and how it's affected these communities and continues to keep communities of color back. On building on what Paul said, I went into Boston a couple of days ago. I live just outside Boston. I went in for the Black Lives Matter march in Boston a couple of days ago, alongside my wife and my eldest daughter. And I also was struck by the diversity of the crowd, a younger crowd, made up of every single race, every single demographic. And I think that's reflective of a couple of things. I think it's beyond argument now that human rights are inextricably linked, whether it's the rights of Black and brown people, LGBTQ community rights, of women's reproductive rights. When one, and to link all this with sports, I often say, certainly in terms of sport development, a rising tide lifts all boats. When each of our rights are better recognized and better raised, we all benefit. And now the test here is that in our own human mindset, we have this zero-sum mentality. And to link it to sports, for one team to win 2-0, somebody has to lose 2-0. So when we think about lifting the rights of Black and brown people, we think the rights of somebody else has to come down. But it's not a zero-sum game. It's a rising tide. So when you lift the rights of Black and brown people, you lift the rights of the aged. You lift the rights of our frontline workers, which were tested to its breaking point in recent weeks with the pandemic. You raise the rights of every single body, every single other marginalized group. And that's the takeaway here. Recognize that these rights they aren't challenging you. They aren't challenging your privilege. We're all aiming for that equality.
That's the same as the economy. I don't want to teach anyone in the United States about economics, but the fact is, if other nations grow their economies, yours benefits. It doesn't get knocked backwards. It's exactly the same. Sorry, Mr. President, I hope you heard that.
Look, this is something that I want to bring it to politics. We're not young guys here. I was you three young. Well, I guess Paul's with us, but Mark and Shaka are little babies still compared to us. But I was 10 years old when I grew up in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and it was 10 years old, and I grew up literally on the border of Newark and Elizabeth, which let's say it wasn't an affluent white neighborhood. Okay, I'll say it that way. And I remember the curfews back then, and I remember the horrific scenes of people being, knocked over by hoses. And I try to explain to my kids who genuinely don't see color. I mean, they genuinely don't see color. I said, we lived in apartheid. Don't think that this is just South Africa. When I was a little kid, the black kids in my neighborhood couldn't drink the same water fountain as we had. And I mean, that's staggering. I'm still alive. I'm not, this isn't something I'm talking about my grandfather. I'm talking about me, and I guess let me say it in this way. I guess that I'll tell a horrific story, an absolutely horrific story. Told to me by a guy that you all know, but I won't mention his name. He was working with a sports manufacturer, and the sports manufacturer was down in South Carolina or North Carolina. I can't remember, but you're going way back now into the 70s or 80s might have been, and they were manufacturing stuff. And in the hallway, you could piece this together. In the hallway was a picture of a life-size photo of Pele, a cutout. And the son that was running the company said was about 50, I guess. And his father was one of these old guys about in his 80s, old Southern white guy. And he said, he comes upstairs and he says, "Son, what's that N doing in the lobby?" And the son says, this is in front of a friend of ours who you guys all know, but I don't want to put him in that position. The son says, "That's no N, that's Pele."
Honorary white.
Yeah, and boy, that story has stuck with me for 30 years. And I just think of, it's Pele, it's Michael Jordan, and you guys are from different cultures. I still so upset when I see friends in Italy talk about, well, he's not really black, he's Brazilian. Why? Because he's a really good player. He's, and it just staggers me. What can we do to bring it down to normal people? And I say in this regard here, very importantly, I really believe we're living in the white man's last stand in America. And I mean that with all sincerity. Every time, every time we look around, we have from our president to the new Supreme Court to everything seems to be white man's last stand. That's all I can really say it as. And do you guys feel that I'm right about that, or am I? Because it seems like we're fighting this every day. I mean, the kids realize this is wrong. The young people realize it's wrong, but we have all these old white guys telling us, no, it's okay. He's not an N, he's Pele.
Yeah. This is grown up. You got to understand it. And the old generation, that's what they've been growing up with. Yeah. That's like my mum. She can't change right now. The discipline she has, as much as we tell her, "Mum, what you do is wrong," she will never change. And that is the same situation with the older generation. I'm not going about you. The older generation, how they've grown up, which is black, N is N, W is W. That's what they are.
Hey, Paul, they're not going to be here forever. They're not going to be here forever.
Mark, they're not going to be here forever.
No.
But when you have a Supreme Court in the United States of America that's soon will be made up, if Trump wins again, you'll have probably 7 people that are white males in their 50s. And that will affect not only your kids, but your grandkids.
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's what I can only do what I do. And that's what we nurture. With my foundation, we reach out to the youngsters. As they grow up, they reach out to their youngsters and they reach out to their pioneers as such to teach them how the racism, how it affects. And this is what they need to know and understand racism and how it affects. This is the area where a lot of them won't even teach. They won't even reach out. It's why they're concerned. And as I said, I know they won't be here for long, Mark, but they're here doing damage. And that's what they're doing at this present time. Once they're still here, they're doing a lot of damage and it can slink in. still thinking him. And that's what I'm fighting against.
And that's what I want to hear now from Mark and from Shaka, if you can. You know,
I was just gonna say it frightens all of us. And
Yeah.
and I don't mean to make light of, you know, they're gonna die off, and you know, and once they die off, you know, we're gonna be good. That's not it. But I do really feel that we're at a point in our existence right now, and not just in America, right? And I think, you know, the pandemic hit us all and made us all stop, right? And do whatever we weren't doing enough of. Spend time with our families, go out in the yard and cut the grass, do whatever. Like, just stop. You can't leave the house, right?
You should see my garden, Mark. It's beautiful.
And then,
so many vegetables.
Exactly. And then we have the George Floyd situation. It's made us all sort of stop. And the people whose voices we weren't hearing enough of suddenly now have a voice, right? They now suddenly have a voice. And those old people with those old ways of doing things, and Paul, to your point about, you know, club owners, and you don't see it changing. You know what? I see it changing at some point, because the people in the stands collectively are going to stand for it. It's not just on the player, right? And so again, it's about business, right? Once your stakeholders say, you know what, we're not going to put up with this, they'll change, and that's really what I'm hoping for. So when my son goes jogging in our neighborhood tomorrow, when he comes back, all I can do is just ask him, hey, how was your mile time this time? Not, hey, you make sure your music wasn't too loud, right? Did you see any, like, you know, like all these things that I shouldn't even have to even think about or worry about.
Let me bring it to completely different, to the women's. And Shaka, I want you to talk about this if you can. You know, here we are in 2020, and we're the racism problems are so rampant. The sexism, we just sort of are still in the Me Too movement. You have the women's national team. You have everyone sort of saying, everyone, well, they got equal pay. Everyone, you even have the vice president saying equal pay, or, you know, the former Vice President Biden, right? And then bang, you get the ruling. They don't even make it to trial.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I get worried when I see this, when I see so little movement, or I see people twist the rioting as, you know, twist the rioting into, well, see, that's the problem. You know, they're not going to get anywhere because they're rioting now. You know, it's just,
right.
Well, anyway, I talked enough. Shaka.
Yeah, well, I mean, aside from the rioting, I think people who point to that are looking to distract from the real issue. Right. You know, as I saw someone say today, if you are saying, well, I'm really sorry that a black man died, but the rioting, you're looking at it from the wrong angle. You should be saying, sorry about the rioting, but a black man died here. Yeah. Other side. Right. I think what you've seen with the women's game and their own quest for equal pay and how it played out in the courts is the difference between equality and justice. Maybe they couldn't, because of how the game is structured in terms of TV rights and the money paid to work for the World Cups for both the women's, and the discrepancy in between. From a legal perspective, the women getting paid equally in terms of a percentage translates to less for them financially, even though, and I'm speaking in terms of the US women's here and their pay as compared to the US men's. So even though it is in legal terms, quote unquote, equal, justice was not served. And that for me is, again, the challenge to, as you initially, as the point was initially made, having these archaic 50 and 60-year-old white men sitting in courtrooms making these judgments, because inevitably it'll be rooted in their own learning. So whereas you might feel you've gotten equality in a legal sense, I just think the women still haven't had their justice.
I'd like to look at the fallout of what's happening. And because in a pandemic, as we know only too well, you have to find the vaccine, but you also have to deal with the people who have suffered the illness. And if I look back to the terrible old days of black people breaking into the higher echelons of professional football, some have come out fine, but some have come out very scarred. And I think it's critical to understand that those who have come out scarred, it's not their fault that they're scarred. If you carry scars, it's because the scars haven't gone away. It's the fault of the people who are responsible for placing the scars there. In the wake of what's happening now, many people will be scarred. What do we do about them?
Neil, I have to break in before you answer that. They just added second-degree murder charges to Officer Derek Chauvin. They just laid that charge in Minnesota. So I wanted you guys to know that as you're answering this question.
Is that enough?
Well, I don't know, but second-degree murder can take, a life sentence. And maybe that's, I don't know if it's enough. That's,
I don't know if it's enough for the people. This really, like you said, Neil, this is going to carry here over England, I feel, a long way. I think for us here, what we're going to have to work with, we're going to have to work with the police. We want the police to work with us in how they can communicate and how they're going by stopping people, black people on the streets, why they're stopping them, how they react with them. That's our connection, what we need from the police right now. Because if that ain't going to happen, this will continue forever. I'm serious. I heard a little. Sorry.
Do you sense there's a new sort of will after this? Do you sense it in your hearts? You three lads, a new type of will to get greater action.
Yeah, there is more will from us black organisations that are out there now that seeing what happened to George. We're reaching out to the police. We're now to share you, look, this can't continue. How can we help and you help us? This is the strong words that's coming out right now. I think we was like taking everything as it was because we thought the police had the power. They can do what they want, they stop and search and so forth. But now it's not agreeing. You're going to bring a war. To stop the war, let's reach out. What can we do now? Because this is something, we don't want to see that, George. We don't want that happening here in England like that. Don't get me wrong, it's happened. It's not so blatantly. Don't get me wrong, I'm telling you. But that's what we don't want to see here in England, because if that does, this place will erupt. You think this place will erupt. And them youngsters, they're not silly. Understand, these youngsters here in England are not silly anymore. That's what I'm saying. So this is the communication. We want to reach out now to the police constable, to the hierarchies. Look, what can we do? What can you do? Let's do something. The program has to work with your police now to reach out how you can respond with the youngsters. You need to know, because how you're going about it now, stopping, you're asking me a question. Next thing, you got my hand in a handcuff. Yeah. For what? I'm thinking, where do you go? There's a reaction right there. Talk to me. What is it about, officer? That's the first thing. I'm seeing it every day. This can't continue. So I would like to say, yes, we can do something. And something like this that has happened with George will affect right now. It's going to change. It has to change. I believe that.
Do you guys think it'll change in America? Mark, Shaka?
I'll just say I certainly hope so. I pray so. We've had days here with the whole family's home like everybody else, where literally I've had, like 2 straight days where I didn't talk to my sons.
Whoa.
I didn't know what to say to them.
Yeah. I
see them struggling, and I'm struggling. So I take my old ass outside and I put some mulch down, right? And there are no leaves on the ground, but I chased that one leaf that just fell because we're all like messed up in the head. And I know that my big son just went for a jog in the neighborhood, and I would run with him, but I'd never keep up. But I want to, right? and it scares the mess out of us. And, you know, my wife, who's also a journalist, she didn't even put her foot in the social media conversation until a couple of days ago. We're talking about a Black mother. They're feeling a different kind of pain that Black dads don't even know about. They carry these boys in the belly, right? And so where I fell short in talking to my boys, because for 2 days I couldn't say anything. I couldn't, not even dad jokes. I had nothing. She picked up and said, "Hey guys, you know, how's it going?" And then she'd wink to me, and then, you know, like a little puppy dog, I'd come in and join the conversation, because I am messed up in the head as well, right? I can't talk football. I can't talk, right? Now, you know, thankfully and prayerfully, we get out of that. But I think, you know, we talk about, you know, Neil, you talk about, you know, is there a chance for change? I'm an optimist. All of us are here. I certainly hope so. But change is scary, and change is hard. And there needs to be a mandate from people who say they're here to serve and protect us, right? From the President of the United States down to the Chief of Police, to say, if this is who you are, if this is the type of attitude that you foster, we're coming for you, and we're not going to tolerate it. That's what we need to hear, because if Black and brown people are saying to themselves, hey, let's work together, we're literally just a beautiful choir.
Beautiful, I agree. Shaka, what do you feel? You feel like there's a chance for change this time around?
Yeah, I do. I feel like the winds of change are really blowing now. And there's a few things to that. First of all, let me say, equally, as a parent, it's been an especially tough time. Because when we first started dealing with the issue of racism, and in whatever capacity that was, we did it with the sincere belief. The driving force in our efforts was that we were making a better world for our kids. Now, all of a sudden, we have not just woken up, but we've been punched in the face with the reality that we haven't delivered that promise for our kids. And that was hard for us. That was hard for me to accept, to recognize. And then I go out, as I mentioned, and march in Boston a few days ago, and you see the young people and the numbers that come out, and you feel invigorated in that these are the ones who are now going to change the world. Maybe it's for our grandkids at this point, but our efforts have not been in vain. We haven't delivered on our promise, but they haven't been in vain. And I think that's where I have found a renewed optimism that the young people, they've got it. They know what they're doing. It's time it's time for them to bring it home. We just have to keep supporting them as best we can.
You're right. Sorry. And
please, right. Paul, let's get you have the final word, Paul, on hope and optimism.
Sorry, they're not silly no more. They're understanding everything they're seeing. Yeah. And that's who we got to believe in right now. It's funny, I'm just going to quickly say, and I see this T-shirt, because I know the shirt and I wear it for when I go there. It's powerful how when you wear a shirt. I've been walking since Monday, since the Jordan incident, and my shirt says, love music, hate racism. No word, proper, in fact, I've worn twice. I wore it in black and I wore it in green. And I've walked the park. People that say good morning to me, they see me regular, have seen the shirt and give me the nod. Not the morning, recognize.
Yes, sir.
And walk. I'm telling you, it's amazing. Trust me, because
I'll take an extra large. I'll take an extra large.
I need a couple of those too, huh?
Yeah, but it just makes you aware. They are aware of this, yeah? And as such, everybody's listening out. What's gonna happen? What's the new? And this is gonna be big. The movement's gonna be happening. All organisations here in England is going to be making movements, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm going to say it like I am looking forward to it, because something has to happen. Something like that. I'm disgusted about it. It's hurt me, but because of it, it's going to make a movement here respond to it, and that's what we needed right here. Safety for our kids, safety for everybody, and not just for black people. Just You know what I mean? That's how I'm feeling right now.
I think we've
So,
got to demand
good.
that courage as well, lads, from these leaders, from all the way through the government,
Everywhere.
and everywhere from the game, through the people who are in charge and are supposed to be our leaders. And we've got to find the courage in ourselves and demand that courage to be shown from them. We've got to go through this. We cannot just keep going over and over and again and around this with this issue. This has got to be stood up and unified. And I think that diversity everywhere that we've seen in these reactions, Charlie, there's response. It's been evident in the protests. It's been such a diversity of people and of different persuasions and color that this is it. The sad tragedy of George Floyd has got to be stated, that this will ignite this new will in all of us to stand arm in arm and to be together and equal and demand this.
Final thought, final question. Mark Wright, Paul Canoville, Shaka Hislop, I want to ask you guys, football's role. Will it be fundamental for change?
Always
you call my name first, so
Yes,
I'll go first.
you go first, Mark.
Look, football's the greatest sport in the world. It means a lot to everybody on this call. And I think that football can be a catalyst to change, and it can affect even the owners and the leagues that pay the players. And it could start from the top. We see the impact that, and I know this because you see the impact that, or the reaction from the NBA, for example, versus the NFL. The NBA has fostered an environment where their players feel empowered to speak out. And it's not out of form or out of sorts for them to do that and to rally around each other. On the NFL side, everything's a prepared statement, and you can see that. Football is bigger than both of those games, both of those leagues. If we can figure out a way to take the good from the NBA and to stay away from everything that the NFL is doing, and figure out how we can rally together and not make this just a black player problem, but to make this our game's problem, right? And collectively fix it. I mean, we can knock the ball around like Barcelona and make it happen. I believe that. I believe that. I'm an optimist. And I had to drop Barcelona in there some kind of way, Ray.
No, Ray's happy with you. Shaka, you want to bring it to Newcastle, please? That's Ray. He'll be really happy.
Absolutely. So what I say to that is I started Shuri's Suddenly Red Card as a founding patron, and as I mentioned, still serve as its honorary president during my Newcastle playing days. And the one thing I recognized was the outsized impact that football has, and especially in a town like Newcastle. It's more than the 50,000 people that cram into that stadium every weekend. It's more than the players and the diversity that comes with the dressing rooms. And as much as racism and inequality is a societal issue, I think football is best placed to reflect how much stronger we are when we're united, when we stand arm in arm, when we have each other's backs, when we fight the same fight. Football can lead that change. It's what I've always believed. It's what I continue to believe.
Paul, final word, Paul. This is really the final word this time.
I'm going to be short. I'm going to be quick because this ankle's paining me, right? The Paul Canoville Foundation. We've always used football to engage. We always use it because of my background, and it helps. It's a powerful, as everybody said, it's a powerful tool, football, here in England. And for me, I inspire, I unite our youth. But as well as that, resilience. Because every time we get knocked down, we pick ourselves up. Every time we get knocked down, we pick ourselves up. And that's the belief we've got to believe in right now. And that's what I believe. Sorry, gentlemen, I thank you. You invited me here. Yeah.
Paul,
Neil,
what a pleasure. Paul Canoville, Mark Wright, Shaka Hislop, Neil Barnett, and Rocky Ray Hudson. Thank you, fellas.